welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Urânio Paes.
And today we're talking with Desta Goehner. And Desta is a social 2, and she's a graduate of our professional certification program. So professionally certified to use the Enneagram in her work. And she works as a spiritual director and also with leaders in leadership development. So welcome, Desta.
Yeah, we are super pleased to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
And I'm really interested in talking with you today. And we're going to talk with you about two things. One is your growth journey as a social 2. And I think, as you know, we believe the subtypes are super important. And one of the things I've been seeing lately is that I don't think the subtypes always, people don't always know the subtypes even if they know the Enneagram. And so we're focusing a little bit on that. And I think the growth journey of a social 2 is particularly important to understand because of the pride, right? And we sometimes say social 2 has double pride, the pride of the 2 and the pride of the social dominant instinct. And I know from knowing you and having you go through our programs that you are someone who has really done some really beautiful work with the Enneagram, and that you really have taken the journey, as we say. So we want to talk to you about that, and we also want to hear how some things about how you integrate the Enneagram with your work in particular.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I think B said it all. So, would you like to add anything about your introduction? What you do in life before we go on?
Yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about you, just for our listeners to learn, like, where are you in the world? And maybe how did you come to the Enneagram? Like, how did you learn about the Enneagram, and what were your first impressions?
Okay. I'm in the Los Angeles area, born and raised my whole life. I love Southern California and I feel deeply rooted here. My pronouns are she, her. And I am a spiritual director and I work with church leaders, mostly in the Western United States, doing leadership and spiritual formation. And I think it's pretty clear to me what my vocation is and what I'm supposed to be doing. And all of that Enneagram journey started, let's see, my oldest, probably about 18 or 19 years ago. My sister is the one that introduced the Enneagram to me. She was working in an institution and they were doing some work with the Enneagram. And she gave me the big Russ Hudson and the big blue book, what I call it.
Yeah.
And we started talking about it. And I remember trying to decide if I was a 7 or a 2 or maybe a 9. All three of those kind of seemed like they could possibly be me. And she, back then, when I said, well, I wonder if I'm this, she was like, like she knew pretty clearly what she thought I was.
She gave you the book, and she knew what your journey, what your discovery might be. Wow.
She did. She knew she was a 7. And so, and now she understands. She doesn't do that anymore and tell people what they are. But I think the journey for me, it's mostly been with her. We've really grown together a lot using it. I had 3 young kids back then. And so I dabbled in it and I started recognizing some things about myself and starting to see it show up more. And then I entered a spiritual direction program. And in that time and place, all of a sudden I was stepping away from who I had been before and was kind of entering this new space of spiritual practices and a deeper inner journey. And that's really, I think, when like a lot of the self-reflection and the observation started happening and I could really start seeing myself more clearly. And then I had a couple friends and we would talk a lot about it. And then I would just start talking about it with people. And then before you know it, like every conversation, we were talking about the Enneagram. And then people were asking me to teach it, workshops. Would you do this retreat? And I started doing those. And then I thought, I don't really want to be doing this like without integrity. And so then that's when I started searching for a program that I could, that would add integrity to what I'd been learning already. And I did a lot of research, and I chose the Chestnut Paes Enneagram Academy because it looked like the one that fit all of my needs and the one that lined up with my values. And I grew so much in your program, the learning about the subtypes and just so much more in depth. And I think for me, it got outside of the feelings. There was a lot of thinking, a lot of hard like concepts. And for me, that's what helped me grow. I kind of say it got me out of my heart space and into my head space. Um, and I even remember like when I was done with the program, I remember saying in one of the spaces, I don't feel like I can talk or teach about the Enneagram now because now that I know so much more, I feel like I can't do it. And Urânio, that's when you were like, okay, that's when you should be teaching it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, um, but maybe that was a little bit of humility. So I think that's it. And now I really, for me, I wish that everybody would get a driver's license, and I wish that everybody would know their Enneagram type and subtype because I can't see. I hope that someday, like, our Enneagram types are like hovering above our heads somewhere.
Right. Or on our driver's license.
Yes, I can't not see it in movies, in books, in people, in interactions. It's just everywhere, and it's been a huge gift to me. So I have so much gratitude for it in my life.
Well, that's I love that you were just enthusiastic about it and talking about it all the time, and then people started inviting you to do things, and then you knew that you needed to go deeper. And it sounds like your personal growth journey kind of was at the same time of your journey in learning to be a spiritual director, which makes sense because they kind of go together. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like, maybe, to discover that you're a two and to start realizing things about yourself that took you deeper into understanding yourself?
Yeah, at first, and for many years, I loved that I was a two. I thought that was really
Uh-oh.
wonderful. Yeah. Um, yeah. And I saw myself as a helper and a giver, and I thought that those things were and are really good. And so I just thought such good things about myself, and saw all the ways that I would help people. I would take people meals and, rally around different people when they needed help and support. And then when I really started to do the deeper work and really started to see myself, and then I remember reading the subtype in your book, B, about the social two, and I felt like disgusted, like sick to
Mm.
my stomach,
Wow.
because I realized that's me. And it
Wow.
took me a little while. I knew that was me, but I had a little bit of a denial, maybe like 3 minutes, because then I just couldn't not see it. And then
Yes.
I just did this whirlwind of like looking back over my whole life and recognizing how my two-ness, how my socialness was showing up in spaces and how those combined. And I mean, honestly, now when I talk and teach about the Enneagram, when I get to twos, I really try to help people see how, I mean, I guess gross is the kind of word that I felt about myself when I realized it,
Yeah.
because I felt all of a sudden I could see all the times I did and still do and still will manipulate and do things to get what I want and what I need. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
Once you really see it, you
Yeah.
can't unsee it. And
Yeah.
it goes from being something that you and again, I'm speaking of myself here, feel kind of good about, to seeing through it, and seeing how it's a strategy. And it's a strategy that masquerades as selfless and heroic, but underneath is more about self-interest, but in a way that gets denied. So I'm there with you, sister.
100%.
Yeah, sometimes that's how we see choose that have this kind of deep realization and the disappointment of realizing that things were not as beautiful as we thought they were. Sometimes choose need to work through a lot of emotions that also come
Hmm.
both from being a hard type and pride. So there is a deflation,
Mhm.
for instance, that happens, and something that I feel so disappointed at myself, which has to do with pride and being true emotional. Not that being emotional is any bad, but for all of us there is one center of intelligence that dominates the scene, and it's too much. Like for me it's the head center, for Chu it's the heart center. So I guess my question is, how did you negotiate with the emotional impact of that aha moment?
Hmm. Well, that aha moment continues because I think I constantly say that Enneagram work is layered work. As soon as I uncover a layer of something, then there's another layer for me to look at and do more work for. So I think that aha moment continues. And for me, what I'm in my practice, what I have found is that spiritual practices were a gift to me. I hadn't really had spiritual practices my whole life. I was raised as a person of faith and gone to church and worship, but there weren't really things and tools that I would use every day to incorporate my faith and my learning. So now I say the pause is the best thing for me. And what
Uh-huh.
I've had to realize is that, and I heard this the other day be on the one of the podcasts that you guys just did, and you were saying like emotion isn't bad, and that sometimes like our world tells us that if people are emotional or over emotional that there's something wrong or bad about that. But I know that I process everything through emotion first. And so what I've had to learn is that I have to pause to experience that emotion and to feel it and let it pass through me, and then to try to respond instead of reacting out of an emotional space. And so that pause could be a couple minutes. That pause could be a couple days or a couple weeks even before I let myself like get outside of that space. And that's been hard to realize, um, that I have this automatic response. And really what I also had to learn is that I was feeling other people's feelings, and then now it's taking me longer to get in touch with my own feelings when I pull away from people. So I have to be by myself, and I'm getting better at being in a group of people and being able to connect with myself. But just pausing to let those things and then let them, sink in and go through me, and then figure out what is the action, if any, is going to happen now after this.
That's
Did I answer
really
that
well
question,
said.
Urânio?
Yeah, that's really well said. I
Okay.
think that was an excellent question, Urânio, and I think that I want to highlight some things that you said because they resonate a lot with me. And I think that pause that you're talking about is really great. And I love how you say it can be like 3 minutes or a minute, or it can be a day or a week. And what I was thinking of when you were talking is like how I really had to learn through painful experience, like, don't send that angry email right when you're in the midst of that reaction that 5 minutes after
Yes.
you got the email that triggered you. And so I think that's really great. And I also think what you're describing is a really important way to work with emotions, to really give them some space, because I think before we understand all about our type, and especially us as heart types, it's almost like such the air we breathe that we don't realize that we need to, like you say, pause, back up a little bit, like give that what's happening some space so that we can really identify, okay, what is the emotion? How can I, like you say, let it settle or process it or talk through it with someone so that I get to a place where I'm drawing the information out of it, but I'm not reacting from it. So I really, really like the way you describe that, and the way that that's something that we need to learn. And then I also think as twos, um, sensing or feeling everyone else's feelings. And I know when I first started therapy, it's like if someone asked me what I was feeling, I wouldn't know, but I felt like I was also an emotional person and living in a sea of emotion. So I think that's also a really important discernment that you're naming, of learning, okay, when am I feeling somebody else's feelings, and how can I separate that out from mine? And I also want to highlight what you said, because for me, I would say when I was first working on myself as a two, I realized how important it was to be alone. Like we really need some time to be alone. And like, it can be like 30 minutes or a day, but we need that time to be alone and reconnect with ourselves. And I like how you said, like, on the growth journey of a two, a little bit later, you become able to be with other people and discern the difference or come back to ourselves. But that can take some time. And I even remember one time when I was in graduate school and I had been living with roommates for a while, and all of a sudden I realized I need to live by myself. Like, I need to really get that space. So I think what you're saying is right on and really, really important for people to understand.
At the retreat with you all in Northern California a few years ago, when people were sharing their stories, I was working pretty intentionally that week at not accessing my social two and trying to just recognize when that showed up. And I remember watching, there was an 8 that I just kind of was watching through the week. And then there was a 4 that I was also watching. And when somebody shared their story, a lot of people in the space were getting very emotional about what the person shared. And I remember sitting there and thinking, I'm not crying. I'm
Wow.
not having any emotion about this. And I still felt compassion for them, but I wasn't, and I thought I wasn't like emoting about it. And
Mm.
that moment was really significant for me, because I thought, this is a new feeling, or like, and maybe it wasn't a feeling. I don't know what it was, but I remember thinking, this is wild. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sitting in this space. Normally I'd be like crying, and just sitting here and holding this space with this person and all these people, but not being overly emotional about it and responding.
Wow.
I like this example, um, and I'll say a few things that might be hypothesis for this experience you describe now. One is that sometimes people who are highly emotional, while they can be empathetic and have an easier time getting in touch with deeper feelings, also there is a shallower side to that, which is almost like a reflex. Like the other one cries, I cry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is not as
Yep.
deep as some
Oh, yeah.
emotional people think it is,
Mhm.
like crying in a movie or
True.
whatever. And then the second thing is maybe not being attached to the image of being emotional and giving, but also
Yeah.
in a way not putting yourself in the position of being the one meeting the person in what they need. And you
Mm-hmm.
saw that others were doing that, and you could be in your place and be compassionate. And I don't know, but I'm saying too much here, and I would want to listen from you what makes sense to you.
I completely relate to the quick emotion, the surface, trying to connect. I think a lot of times, um, I have used that. I'm sure I still will, but I try not to. So I'm trying to like turn inward and like think, is this really what is needed right now? And I think being in that space at the retreat, where then I recognized you had the people there who were there to respond to other participants if they needed support. Um, so I knew I didn't have to respond because other people were there to do that. And I think that gave me permission to just be present. And then, as I said, as I was watching the 8 through the whole week and just watching them be, I just kind of started to try to take on some of that. and I really liked that person, and there were a couple of them. And so I thought, I can do that. And then, like, on breaks and things, instead of sitting around and like talking to other people and building relationships, I left and I went and I walked. And I left from that retreat. And as I drove away out of the retreat center, I thought, I don't know if anyone here will miss me or will reach out to stay in relationship with me. And I feel okay about that.
Wow. So you really connected a lot with yourself and didn't make it all about the connections that you would make there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think that's a huge growth thing for me in my social two-ness, like now being in spaces and not having to overwork to become kind of the center of attention or to be friends with everyone. And and I feel such relief in that also. Like
Mm,
I love being with myself. I
mm,
love being at home. The pandemic was so good for me.
mhm,
There was a lot of needs, but I couldn't really respond to many of them. So I just got to be at home. And that's when I really started realizing I like myself.
Yes, it can be a surprise for us.
Mm.
Yeah,
And to
Yeah.
find out there is more to life than relationships, perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then there's grief there too, because I realized some relationships that I had been working so hard at, when I started kind of like laying off of them and seeing like how will people respond when I'm spending more time with myself, not overworking for relationships. I have lost some friendships
Mhm.
that I still have deep grief about because I realize I was overworking in those relationships. And for whatever reason, other people don't have the capacity to show up in the way that I needed them to. And so in that space for me, the true friends showed up for me that I could see I don't have to overwork for these people in these relationships.
Right. Yes, all
Yeah.
of us, when we change, uh, we go through impacts in our relationships with others in the world that don't understand as much our growth path and what's happening. And as you said, the right people stay, and other ones with a lot of grief for us tend to go. But it sounds like
Mhm.
this was true for you. Do you notice any other impact that you started having on people as you changed?
Well, I think as a mom, I have 3 kids, and as a mom, I stopped overdoing for them also.
Mm,
And I think what that did is the impact it made them realize that they had capacity, that they had the ability to do the things for themselves. They were also growing and now they're older, but I think I realized that I didn't need to be over helping and over manage them so much. So for
mm,
me, it felt like freedom and relief. And for them, it felt like, oh, I have agency. I have wisdom. I have my own experience and I can do these things. And I'll be here to support them in the most important things. And I don't have to be doing all those things for them.
That's
So,
beautiful.
and yeah.
So before we go too much on with more good stuff, which I know there's a lot of because you're obviously doing the work and it shows. Can you give us some examples of maybe a little more of the dark side of the two or the social two? Because I think sometimes people they portray twos as good, as helpers, and it's not very complicated, and people don't really
Yeah.
understand like what you said when you found out that you were a two and you really got it and you started feeling kind of disgusted. But tell us a little more about the dark side, if you don't mind. Because not
Yeah.
everyone can tell us about the dark side if they haven't done the work to really see take the longer journey. So if as you look back maybe, or what do you see that you kind of maybe that's really an aspect of the lower self of the two that's really can do some things that sort of go against that sort of positive helper kind of veneer that I think sometimes people see on twos, but don't really understand the more complexity underneath this type.
Yeah. I think I think I know I put on a good image out in public and for people, And what people don't often see, the ones closest to me do, um, is when I get really mad or angry when my needs aren't met, or you know, I really see the giving and the helping as, like, I think you've said, strategic help. That I help people, or I would support people because I thought that they would have something to give to me later on down the line. And I think when it comes to that time, if they're not able to give or support me in whatever that need is, they might not even have any idea that I have a need or a request from them. But if they can't, what happens to me is, I mean, it gets really ugly. I get really feeling like, just I can spin and think, just over and over, all the things I did to and for them, and how much effort I put into something to support them. Or, I mean, this is a minor thing, but I used to make a lot of meals for people in my community when they'd had a baby or when they needed something. And I would make like a home cooked meal with everything you could think of, from the appetizer to the salad to the drinks and dessert and everything. And I would package this all up and I would take it to somebody's home and give it to them. And then I would come home, and then I would realize, looking at my kids and my family, like, I didn't make enough for our family. And so I was so focused on taking the nice thing so well packaged to other people. And then I would get home, and then I was struck with, okay, now I have to make another dinner for my family. And it would never be like that nice or that well, then it was just something simple. And then I think in that, I would feel like, as I was making the second dinner, I would feel something wrong, something disconnected, because then I wasn't feeling good about the meal that I had taken. I was feeling like all this pride and all this, like, what I say is grossness. Um, and then I've realized too that, like, when I like go out on an edge and like ask for something from somebody that I need, or and they can't give it or do it, what I've had to really realize is, like, okay, this isn't reinforcing the story that, like, they can't fill my needs, but I need to figure out what I need, and I need to take care of that. I don't know how many, like, Mother's Days I've ruined because was going off these expectations of the world and what Mother's Day should be. And I just realized after a couple of years, I actually didn't really want to be around my family. I was with them all the time. I just wanted to be alone. But I couldn't ever say that because that sounded horrible, to say, oh, I want to be alone on Mother's Day. And so, even kind of reconciling that, I felt like I was an ugly, like, horrible person that didn't want to do this. But then I realized that's my true want and true need in in that time and space and on that day. So I think a lot of what I've had to do is I feel horrible, I feel gross, I feel ugly, I feel selfish. um and it kind of can just spiral, and then I have to pull myself out of it. But then when I'm out in public, I put on a good face. So one of the things I've learned is, when I'm in groups of people now, I go to a couple of things where there's groups of people, and I know that many years ago in one of these groups, I would have been the president of this group. But instead, I just sit in the back of these meetings in the space every time we're gathered, and I can kind of see all the things that need to happen, and I can feel myself kind of prideful about those things. But then I just let that pause, and I just let it settle, and I think it's okay for me just to be here and not doing that, because now I get to go home and I don't have to overwork for this group, and I can do what I want to do instead of what this group needs. So I think it's a battle between feeling selfish and like I'm a horrible person just by asking for what I want or need.
Mhm.
Did
Right,
that
right.
answer?
And then when you don't ask for it, like overworking to get it indirectly, or resenting people when they don't fulfill your unspoken expectations. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Resenting people.
very well described. I do want to also ask you about the social two in particular, because you're saying some things that I think are really true, really emblematic of social twos, and things that might be a little bit different for me as a self-preservation two, for instance. I meet some people often in sometimes in typing interviews, and they say something like, I'm not the person who brings the meal to the person who's sick, so I'm not a two. And I
Yeah.
would say, well, you might not be a social two, but you might be a self-preservation two. So for instance, for me, I might somehow try not to be that person who brings the meal, right? Because that feels kind of overwhelming to me, or I withdraw more. And also it sounds like the person who would be the president of the group is someone who's also a social two. Like you say, like you're saying now, you don't have to, you're not necessarily, drawn to be the leader of the group. But can you tell us maybe about what it used to be like? And because I hear social twos saying actually it's very easy to kind of be kind of in front of the room or in front of a group and take the lead. Can you tell us a little bit like maybe what that was used to be like? Although you've done a great job of saying how that shift occurred, where now you can kind of sit in the back and not have to be the center of attention. But how did that? Can you give us some examples of how you would sort of gravitate toward leadership positions or being the president of something?
Mm-hmm. I think probably part of just naturally, I've always been what people would say is a leader. And so naturally have done that. But I know that that was my social two part showing up. I mean, in high school, I was in student leadership. In college, I was in student leadership. And in all of those, I kind of skyrocketed to the top. And I know that it's because I could get to know all the different people in the group. I could manipulate myself to be what I knew they wanted and needed, and then I was kind of in charge of the group or whatever the space was. When I was before I started having kids, I was on a lot of different like planning teams, event teams, different committees and things like nationally all over. And as I started having kids, it started to feel overwhelming, all of those different commitments. And I remember, and this is when my spiritual direction studies were starting, I kind of remember thinking, if I say no, I can't do this team or this event or these things anymore, they might not ever come back to me. And then who will I'll be? I'll just be this woman at home, this mom. I won't be, anybody. I won't be connected with these people, this event anymore, these teams. And then my spiritual director told me, I mean, do you believe that for me, do I believe that God will bring other opportunities to me, And so, okay, I'm going to close these doors. And one by one, I started going off of planning teams and different groups and then was at home with my kids. And I recognize that now as a growth thing. It was hard, but my focus had to be my kids. None of those other people could do the thing of raising my children. But there were other people that could do those other things on the planning teams and the events. Well, then, years later, some of those same things came back to me.
Mm.
And I have been able to choose what I want to do or what I don't want to do. And I do a lot of work to try to determine, like, am I doing this for what reasons? Am I doing this because I just want the glory and I just want to be out here and be seen by everybody in these ways? Or do I actually really want to be seen and not do all these things and be really seen by my husband or my people in my inner circle? So where do I want to be spending my time? Maybe a quick example of this is I went and I walked the Camino de Santiago last year. I
Mm.
did
Wow.
2 weeks. I couldn't take the full time to do the whole French route. I did the Portuguese route. But I didn't tell anybody besides my immediate family that I was doing it because I knew that there was a part of me that would feel like I would want or should tell people and then update people and then tell people about the journey and explain all that. And I decided I want and need to do this for me. I'm not telling anybody I'm doing this. I didn't tell anybody after I went. Then some people found out in some other ways, but I still have never shared that publicly. And even on that trip, I know I could see my growth because I went there thinking I'm not going to meet friends from around the world. I'm going for a spiritual journey for me. And so staying in hostels and albergues and with other people, I could see, ooh, if I wanted, and if I was in personality, I would go and I would do this thing and I would make all these friends and be in that. Or I can choose to be here by myself or sit and do these things and do my journaling. And I had choices and I could see, and it's getting easier to choose the other thing, but my automatic response is to go and to be a part of the group and to try to access that kind of fame. Fame's maybe the wrong word, but
Yeah. 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 I hear totally what you're saying. It makes so much sense. And I love the way you're talking about, I see what the personality is sort of leading me to do. And I've learned to kind of go against that and do the opposite or do something really different.
Yeah. Um, yeah, although I'm a 5, I resonate with you in many things because I'm a social dominant. And I wonder if for you, in this case, something could have happened also that I see happening with me at times, which is my ego wants to tell other people what I'm doing because I want to be recognized for that. And it's like, it's not only that I'll feel dependent on keeping them updated, it's more like I need them to see me. And maybe that's less so for me as a 5, but it's still the social instinct there. And it took me a lot of time to unveil that mechanism because in any other ways, it doesn't show easily for me that I have this dependency on what other people think.
no, 1,000% agree.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to also pick up on a couple other things you said, because I think they're really important. And that is when you were talking about saying no, how you had to kind of learn to say no because there was this fear. If I say no, then I won't be important or people won't come to me when they need something. And maybe I'll want that opportunity. And then what your spiritual director said, like, don't you trust that God will bring these opportunities? And I want to point out that that the high side for us twos is holy will and holy freedom, the holy ideas of type two. And for me, holy will has been huge because like actually before I didn't think that those opportunities would come. And I think I had to create all my own opportunities. And I think being a two is a little bit, I mean, for all of us, when we're in personality, it's a little bit like we're playing God. But I think, especially for twos, it's a little bit like, I know what's best. I need to do these things to make everything happen the way I want or the way I want to for other people. And if I don't, then it won't happen. So it is a little bit like playing God. And so when we think about like holy will, like, don't you think that the universe or God will bring these things to you if you don't go after them? That is a really important switch that we need to make and realize, hey, if it's meant to be, it will come back to me. I don't have to, as you've said several times, which I really like, overwork to make this happen. I can sort of sit back a little bit and see what flows toward me. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think the other thing with that is we were talking about friends, how some people left and some people stayed. I think the other thing is that I think some people might say other people and friendships were that I was drawing that energy. I might say that God brought new and different people into my life because now I was at a capacity where we could meet in that kind of friendship and maybe would have not like passed by them before. Uh, yeah.
Exactly. And I
I think we draw experiences, when we're ready for them.
exactly. And
Yeah.
again, if we
Learnings and
stop overdoing or overworking, then that lets sort of our magnetic power, the power of our being,
yeah.
of our life, bring things to us instead of us
Yeah.
sort of making everything happen or having the illusion that we make everything happen, might be a better way to say it. But I really think that that's a huge
Yes.
shift for twos. And I really like what you said about letting go of some people because for me as a 2, part of the pride is I can make anyone like me. I can make a relationship with anyone. But the most important thing is you shouldn't necessarily make a relationship with everyone. And when you are recognizing that someone can't or doesn't want to meet your needs, or isn't meeting you in some way, it is really important to let that go. And for me as a 2, and I wonder if this is true for you, there's a huge amount of relief when this really
Mm.
sinks in, and I really get like, actually, I don't need to make things happen. I don't need to engineer relationships or manufacture these connections that might not be meant for me or the right thing in my life right now. And like you say, that leaves room for other people that might be
Yeah,
better
I
fit.
think about how much time I wasted, so much energy on creating my image and like trying to respond to other people and do things where I just was like lost myself.
Yes.
And now I work remotely at home and I love it. I love being at home by myself.
Yes.
I miss community, but I realize now, like, wow, I really get to be inward, and I like space. I like just being in my backyard listening to the wind chimes and not and in some ways it's maybe some safety because then I'm not around other people, so I'm not feeling like I have to respond. But I think that has helped build me up so that when I am with other people, that that immediate response is getting further and further away from me at times.
Right. 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 That's well said. So I wonder, anything else you want to ask about her, about the social 2 path? I think it's a good moment to switch and to ask you a little bit about your work. As a spiritual director, how has the Enneagram helped you in your work? How have you applied it in the people, in the situations you work with as a spiritual director and helping people in leadership positions? Church leaders? How have you seen that help them, maybe in your particular field?
Yeah. Well, I've been a spiritual director since 2012. And probably in the last like 4 years, maybe five, I've really started using it more. And now I'm almost to the point where I'm saying like exclusively, like if you want to see me for spiritual direction, where there's going to be Enneagram work involved.
Mhm.
And I do work in conflict mediation with people and groups, and I also use it in those spaces because I think we have a clear path with the Enneagram. Um, my sister says it's like I don't know what she says. It's just like a direct path that helps us to know. So even how people experience God or don't experience God in our spiritual life, I think that a lot of the ways that our shadows show up in our Enneagram type and our subtype, that those there's it's so much easier to work with a lot of our reflections of who other people are in our life get put onto God. We have ideas about who God is and who we are and what God might not see in us or what God might think about us. And I recognize that those are directly tied to our core motivations. And it has really helped me. It was a big shift because in the spiritual direction world, you are taught to ask questions and hold space and just listen to people.
Mhm.
And what I've realized is that in this shift of Enneagram work, there really has to be an intention of a little bit of teaching also so that people can understand this. And so it's this gentle work of listening and then tying in like this might be happening because of this.
Mhm.
And like I was just with somebody the other day and she said, get off my street. Like she couldn't believe that I could say something to her like, I wonder if this is, because
Mhm.
it's what we all experience when we do Enneagram work. You feel very seen. And so
Yeah.
people seeking spiritual direction, I mostly see faith leaders, people who are leaders in congregations or the church who are often alone and isolated and have to they're providing spaces for everyone else to experience their faith and rituals and spirituality, but they don't have a place for themselves. So when they can say honestly what they're thinking and feeling about God, or where they're not feeling God show up, and about their faith, using the Enneagram as a framework is a huge thing. It's really helpful in conflict mediation, because when people, it's the using the shared language. When people can name, oh, I might be doing this behavior with you that's causing conflict, because I'm an Enneagram type 5, and I might be doing this behavior because I'm an Enneagram type 3. And maybe that's clashing here because of these reasons. And it allows people to be holding that archetype instead of it being about them as an individual. And I think it gives people space to be able to navigate through conflict differently and better. And in my work with leaders, just what I just keep saying is like, we can go to any leadership seminar, everybody could go there, but unless you actually know who you are and how you respond or won't respond to those leadership offerings, it's not going to do much. It's going to fall flat. So I just keep talking and teaching and offering spaces where people get to know who they are, their blind spots, their leadership gaps, how they show up in conflict and different spaces, so that then they know what they could work on, and then how it can help them be a more healthy, grounded leader. Because it's not just across the board. We don't need to just learn certain things. And I say that I think everyone is a leader. Our world, and especially the United States, has this idea of what a leader is. And I think everyone can be a leader, but we have to shift the culture of thinking, what is a typical leader and how do people show up, and make space for all different kinds of leaders and Enneagram types. So it's been really powerful, and I've seen the impact on people, and I know that it works. I've seen it, and yeah. Yeah, it really does happen. Well, everything, I'm a member of Spiritual Directors International, so I follow their ethical guidelines. So everything that is said in those spaces is highly confidential. I don't share things about what they share. So I think, um, I know that you have to build trust with people for them to feel like they can be vulnerable. And with some Enneagram types and people, that takes longer. Also, I help, and I learned this from your courses and class and program, that even just in coaching and being with different types of people, for me to recognize how I show up as a social 2, and then also them, like I have to do my own work around what might I be bringing into this space that needs to not be left there. But it's about building trust so that they feel like they can reveal the hard and ugly things about themselves, that they can say the true thing that they're really saying. And that's the thing in spiritual direction. We don't often have spaces where we can actually say the thing that we think, because it feels too, and if it, especially if it's about God, um, and especially if I'm a pastor or I'm a church leader, and maybe my faith, maybe I'm questioning or doubting my faith, but I can't say that anywhere. So I just try to create like a brave space where people feel trusted, um, and that it's okay.
And it sounds like you use both your own real strengths as a 2, and also um, the Enneagram to help them be vulnerable and know what they might need in order to be vulnerable. And I imagine with faith leaders, so often, they're role models, they're up in front needing to sort of model a certain kind of code or morality. And I can imagine it's hard for them to look at themselves. And it sounds like what you're saying is, by creating that space and also seeing them and understanding them, you can help them maybe understand their vulnerability and talk about it. And of course, that's the path to becoming a good role model, I think, being able to look at your shadows and that kind of thing. So it sounds like, and I know the Enneagram is one of the best tools out there to look at shadows in a compassionate way, because we all have them. And like you say, you do a little teaching with that, and you can help people understand that it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's that with this personality, this defensive structure, this kind of comes along as part of the deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have this amazing personal journey of yourself, and you changed over time. So how would you say that your spiritual direction practice changed? How did you change as a spiritual director as you experience new levels of awareness as a social tool?
The first couple of years when I started, I had a 3-ring binder that was like this thick, full of different resources, full, full of different resources that I could use for people. Different resources to start a session with. If I didn't think they knew what they were going to talk about, that I could have something ready based on our last session to read to them to then get their reflection. And now, before I start every session, I try to allow myself at least 15 minutes just to get myself grounded with a candle and a meditation and prayer, so that I'm coming to the space kind of clean. But I trust, I don't bring those kinds of resources anymore. I have them, they're accessible, but now I just trust that I in my language, like, I trust that the Holy Spirit's going to show up, and that I have what I need already, that I don't have to change or do something or use some other resource, that the question that I might need to ask them, or if I'm really deeply listening to them, that even just silence or space or being with them, that I'm going to be, that I trust that I'm going to know how to respond and hold that space. So I think, for me, it's been growth, recognizing I'm not trying to use other resources, and that I already have everything I need, and then seeing that actually play out, and then trusting it.
Wow, it sounds amazing, because it sounds like you went from kind of it's almost a temptation to overwork, to bring too many tools,
Oh,
tricks, resources, as you say, almost like you're not trusting yourself and the space that you create. And now it sounds like you trust both kind of your higher self to know how to meet the person, and that no matter what comes, you'll meet it in the right way. And you're making space for Holy Will, the Holy Spirit to be
yes.
there. And it's almost like part of what you're doing in creating that space and bringing your wisdom is also, as us twos need to learn, is kind of standing out of the way at the same time. Like you're saying, you're coming in clean, which I love. And also, making space for higher wisdom to come through the space that you create with your client.
Yeah, I love all of that too. At times, I see that when choose do the work, the self-development work, they start challenging a little more their clients,
Mm.
not only empathizing and validating them. Did you notice anything around this for you?
Oh yeah, I think that's part of the impact, Urânio. That's it's knowing the path, and like seeing them fall back into the patterns, and being able to recognize that and naming it, and then trying to encourage. And then that's the other piece that's hard for me, because in spiritual direction, we were taught just to hold the space. But I've realized, yeah, not to do too much. But I've realized, like, if somebody's falling back into pattern and I just keep holding the space for them, so then who I am and who I have shifted to be in my spiritual direction practice. And I had to recognize, like, okay, at some point I have to recognize pretty much most of the people that see me are pastors in some tradition or some church leader. And even that kind of impact, I had to kind of reconcile, like, I guess I should just name that this is who I am and this is who's coming to me. But yes, pushing them and encouraging them to move and to work a different muscle, that I do that. And that's been hard based on how I was taught we should be as spiritual directors. But I try to find that balance.
I think it's almost unavoidable that we make a few of our methods a bit more flexible as we truly integrate both the Enneagram and grow, right, ourselves. And I one last question from me. I loved seeing on your website that you say that your work is for people who are in quest of joy, rest, and meaning. How exactly do you do that? And I think these are really good words when it comes to a two doing their own inner work. So how is that? How does that fit into your work?
Hmm. I think a lot. And I know, like, I know I'm going to keep doing some of these unhealthy patterns and I'll be in ego and personality, but I keep trying to draw back. But I love naps. My friends have always teased me I'm a nap queen. But I learned from Trisha Hershey, who's the nap ministry. She has this nap ministry where she's really encouraging people, especially Black women, to rest and to nap because it's countercultural.
Wow.
And I think as a two and as a social two, that really spoke to me because I was always doing for other people. And so this idea that I can sit back and I can just rest and don't have to be doing, that's really helped in my transformation. And I think without joy, transformation and change is really hard. Like, even in conflict mediation, even in hard shadow work, if we can find joy, it's going to help propel us in our journey. And my name is Ethiopian. It means deep joy.
Yeah, it's
And so
Wow.
I
beautiful.
think that's like a core. I try to bring that with me. And so hard work needs rest and joy alongside with it. There needs to be a balance. And I try to remind everybody of that, but mostly myself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you work mainly within one faith tradition? Do you see people, I think you're mainly come from the Christian tradition. Do you see leaders from different traditions or mainly the Christian tradition?
Yeah, I'm a Christian tradition. I'm an ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America Lutheran, progressive Lutheran, but a lot of not every person that sees me for spiritual direction is from that tradition.
Mhm.
It's really nice when you're in one tradition and you can see a spiritual director in another tradition, because I understand the language that they're using and the ideas and the concepts of being a pastor or a church leader, but I maybe not in the circles that they are. So yeah. And I see one person who is not, one person comes to me who's not in a faith tradition, and that works just fine.
Mm.
So I'm hesitant to say I only see church leaders, but I'm just trying to figure out if that's what I lean into. That's,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
And are there ways that you think the Enneagram fits together with Christianity, with people who are on a Christian growth path? Ways that those two things come together in ways that are powerful or that you work with?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I see a lot of Christians kind of rejecting the Enneagram, and I think a lot of maybe rejection is too strong, but I see the Enneagram as a spiritual tool. And I think that some people in Christianity might um, just like me when I was growing up, like we didn't really access spiritual practices and tools in our faith. And so anything like that can seem like it's not good or healthy or kind of weird or odd. But I also have recognized that oftentimes in Christianity, we turn away from the things that can bring us freedom and can help us get to the place that we're trying to transform into. For me, being a Christian, I mean, I don't know, but I often talk about how I think Jesus accessed all the types, and looking at all the different disciples and different Bible stories, and like wondering like how was, in this, like, and I don't say like we don't know their type, but what kind of energy was this person in the Bible bringing to this space, and how do you think you could have responded differently? So in Lectio Divina, we read scripture and sacred text and listen in different ways, and we all listen differently based on our Enneagram type. So we talk about that, how what Urânio hears and what you hear might be different. So for me, the Enneagram pairs really well with my faith and my background, and it allows me to have a more open and free faith, and it gives me grounding. I've just started doing Enneagram meditations for church leaders and
Wow.
using scripture and Enneagram types. So 4 Enneagram types, because I realize like, okay, if I'm having a moment where I pause and I need to like pull myself together, maybe I could do any prayer, I could do any spiritual practice, but what if there was an Enneagram meditation that also incorporated my faith that I could listen to help ground me and to help me in that pause before I respond or react or move forward? So that's something that I'm currently recording now and getting ready to roll out soon.
Beautiful. It's like bringing together these two really sacred traditions. One is sort of honoring a kind of customized approach to whatever type someone is, and bringing that together with the wisdom of scripture. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, love it too.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like excellent,
Thank you.
excellent creative content. So thank you so much, Desta. We really appreciate you sharing your own growth journey and the way you do your work with the Enneagram. So we really, really appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, and just encourage our listeners to read a little more about Desta in our episode description. And yeah, really appreciate your interview here with us.
And thank you for being part of our CP Enneagram Academy community, because we're really, our big mission is to create community. And so when we get to know people like you coming through our programs and being part of our retreats and workshops, it really, really, it makes us feel like we must be doing something right. And also we're in community with people like you doing the work that you're doing. And that's incredibly worthwhile.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, I tell everyone that they should use you. And in every one of my presentations, I have a slide of both of your pictures and a link to your website to
Wow.
tell people, like, these are my teachers. You should.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
for all the ways you've helped me grow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that does it for this episode. We hope you'll join us again next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.